Okay, so moving on to the next segment on today's show, and on Friday on Twitter, it was basically Kyrie Irving versus the league. Now, let's be honest about Kyrie Irving. He's a little bit of a space cadet. Kyrie Irving went to Duke University, which is one of the top institutions of higher learning in the United States. Kyrie Irving years ago was talking about how the earth was flat. Now, I'm not here to tell any adult what they should believe, but we have more than enough scientific evidence that would let us know that the earth is indeed round. Kyrie Irving was talking about the earth being flat, so at that point I realized that Kyrie Irving was not someone that I should listen to. And over the years, I think he's gotten more nonsensical with his views. He has gotten more out there with his views. So on Friday, when word came down that he was going to be the leading player against the NBA's plan on restarting the season and continuing their playoffs, everyone got their jokes in on Kyrie. And based on the initial story we got from Woj, I understood why people were getting their jokes in. He was talking about, little things like, was he going to be allowed in the bubble even though he's not playing, and asking questions about adult beverages. Kyrie Irving was on the Zoom call and wasting everyone's time, or that's what it looked like at least. But then you know what? Something magical happened. Kyrie Irving started making sense according to everything that we saw in the reports from Woj and Shams. So if you look at what happened on Friday with people who were on the call or who had direct knowledge of the call, Kyrie Irving, to me, is doing what we encourage people to do every single day. He voiced his concern, he articulated his plan to the players in it, and then showed opposition to it, but in the end, he said, I'm part of the team, so if the group is deciding this is our play, then I'm going to be a part of it. What we are learning today is players have more power than even I thought they had. And basically what I mean by that is this. If the NFL as a collective, or the MLB Players Association as a collective, or if the NBA and its players really came together and solidified and said, we're not doing X until we get Y would happen pretty quickly because them as a unit have a whole bunch of power. We see the power that individual players like LeBron James have or Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. We see that. And I think Kyrie Irving was trying to stress to the players the power that they had as a group. So when he said, I don't support going to Orlando, plenty of times in our situations we've said we don't want to go, but if everyone else wants to go, cool, I'm down, because you're part of a group. You're part of a core. If your friends are going to do this, you're going to be part of it and ride with them. We should be encouraging Kyrie Irving, voicing good and positive discussions and back and forth amongst the players. Whether it's about what's going to be in the bubble that the NBA players are going to have to be headed to in a couple weeks. I don't have a problem with good, healthy discussion, and that is what's going on across the country. None of us have the plans for our lives to resume to normal. So I don't have any issues with Kyrie Irving coming to the group and just having a conversation on everything, whether it's the bubble or what's going on, because as Kyrie and Austin Rivers of the Houston Rockets said on Instagram the other day, you're talking about a league that is majority African American. A lot of the protests are centered around the treatment of African American people in this country. So I understand why Kyrie Irving feels passionate and feels his actions can take away from the things going on in the streets in this country. And I get that not everyone wants to go. If you're a team like the Brooklyn Nets and you don't really have that big of a legitimate shot to win the NBA Finals with no Kevin Durant or no Kyrie Irving playing, and you're the 7th seed, we know the Nets aren't really going anywhere. We know that the Nets are not advancing very far in the playoffs. So I get how in a situation everyone might not have the same plan on what they need to do, but in the end, it's a collective, and I think we got to look out for not only today and the money, but also we need to do what we think is smart and right, because as players, you have the power. On Friday, Woj tweeted that one player told him that he's trying to give the players a platform to have a discussion on the bubble, racial equality, and unity. And I don't have any issues there. But here's the ultimate question and the ultimate point I'm trying to make here is, where do you draw the line? Because I just gave Kyrie Irving credit for speaking what he believes in, and no doubt about it. And if you missed the report, basically, here's what Kyrie Irving was really trying to say. And that is this, that over the last couple weeks with no sports going on, and even though we're in the pandemic, I think as a country, we've become a little more aware of everything that's been going on around us. We remember in 2017 when the whole Colin Kaepernick thing started, there were just a bunch of people that didn't really understand the point he was trying to make by kneeling for the national anthem, and he was just getting criticized and criticized. But over the last couple of weeks, when people have become more aware of the situations that have been going on, I think more and more people are forgiving Colin Kaepernick for criticizing him, and they're admitting that they understand his actions. I think the point that Kyrie Irving is trying to make is true, and that point is this, is that right now, as a country, we're focusing on the BLM movement and racial injustice, and we're doing our best to eliminate that at all costs. But what Kyrie is saying is this, is that once the NBA does come back, then those same fans that are on the BLM movement and that have been really trying their best to make a change, they're going to go from doing that to criticizing LeBron James or Kawhi Leonard or Giannis when they miss a game-winning shot in the playoffs. And I'm not saying that's not true. Like, that's totally true. Even though we over the pandemic, we've all learned that sports is just a game and life is more important. And in some cases, there are more important things than sports. But once sports do come back, I think fans are going to be passionate as ever, especially NBA fans. And if you want to criticize, one of the best players in the league for missing an open shot to win the game, that's what you signed up for. And I kind of look at this perspective from two different ways. Number one, the first thing that comes to mind is go to work. There have been plenty of African-American people that since since everything went down with George Floyd, and since the BLM movement has really started and taken control, and people have been trying to get that point across the country, since that has happened, people have been more involved and more knowledgeable of the situation. But here's the other thing. They've also been working. Just because you're an NBA player, I think sometimes people forget that's still like their job. They're still getting paid millions upon millions of dollars to, do their best on the basketball court. And just because what Kyrie Irving and the point he made is true, I just don't think that means that we shouldn't be playing. And once again, I'm not criticizing Kyrie for, speaking his mind. It seems to me that he really does feel the way he feels, and he's really trying to promote how he's feeling. But at the same time, just because that's true, I don't think that means that we should not have an NBA season. Just in sports talk radio and really in every other job across the country, there are plenty of African-American people that wanted to be involved in the protests, that wanted to, really fight for justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. But at the same time, at some points they couldn't because they had work. That was their obligation. And if Kyrie Irving really does feel that way and he doesn't want the NBA season and the NBA playoffs to resume because of, everything that he just said and the points he made, that's fine. But all he should do then is just not play. Because just because one player wants that, that doesn't mean that the whole playoffs should be shut down. That's their job. When you're an NBA player, when you signed up to make that choice for that to be your job, right? You signed up for the risk of getting criticized when you screw up. Every athlete does. And just because we're in a hard time right now, I don't think you could be worried about people criticizing you and forgetting about racial, injustice. I don't know if you guys saw the quote that Kyrie Irving said the other day, but he said he'd be willing to do anything to take a stand. And I give him credit for that. And if that's the truth, then just don't play and become the next Colin Kaepernick. And I think if he does, a lot of people's opinion on Kyrie Irving would change. This is a guy that, hasn't really been that well liked around the league over the past couple seasons. And you understand why when he says the earth is flat and stuff like that. But I think in this instance right here, people are going to be getting their jokes in on Kyrie Irving and the kind of guy he is, and I get it. But at the same time, what I will say is this. I understand where he's coming from, but that doesn't mean I agree with him. Just because Kyrie Irving is right, that doesn't in the point he's trying to make, that doesn't mean that the NBA playoffs shouldn't happen. But at the same time, what I'll also give him credit for is this. I think Kyrie is his comments are also going to be bringing up possible concerns that the league is ultimately going to have to look at with this bubble. I don't know if you guys saw, but over the weekend, there was part of the report that dropped that said in the bubble, players are not going to be allowed to leave the premise. And you understand why. They're going to be on the court. They're going to be playing against each other. They're going to be sweating all over the place. Like, you get it. But at the same time, employees of Disney, people that clean the hotels, people that clean the bathrooms, they are going to be allowed to leave the premise. And also media isn't. So if I was an NBA player, I would have a little bit of a concern with that, and maybe for not the reason you would think. I feel like with the coronavirus, especially now recently in the U.S., more people have been starting to adapt to the normal lifestyle, and I do think if NBA players were allowed to leave the premise in Florida, I don't know how great of an idea that would be, because it's just unsafe, and you know that even what's been going on in this country, players would do whatever they can to go out, but if Disney employees are, like, I'd understand why they'd want to, but the point I'm trying to make is if this plan is going to go through, I just don't think you could have anyone really leave the premise because it's not safe and it's hypocritical if you're not going to let players leave the premise to have employees that are going to be literally in the same room as them be allowed to leave the premise. I think that's something the NBA is going to have to really fix before the season does indeed come back. But going back to Kyrie's comments, I see where he's coming from when he says if players, right now, players are focusing on the BLM movement and are focusing on really eliminating racism, and that's great. I totally understand their protests and everything, but I think you have to look at this from two different sides. Just because you maybe agree with what Kyrie Irving said, that doesn't mean the season should be canceled or the playoffs should be canceled, because a couple reasons. Number one, I don't understand why you just can't do both. Is Kyrie Irving right when he says players may get crushed and people may forget about the BLM movement and everything that we've achieved in this country since the murder of George Floyd? Maybe. Fans, they take sports so seriously, and especially whenever the NBA does come back, the fans are going to be so passionate, especially the LeBron fans. They're going to be ready to see that guy win another championship, and maybe we'll see. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we can't do both. Kyrie Irving, he also said over the weekend that he is willing to do anything to get what he believes in and to get that achieved. So if that's the case, and just become the next Colin Kaepernick, man. Just don't play. I don't want to say no one will miss you, but the way some fans around the league think about you, that's how it's looking. So if I'm Kyrie Irving and you really want to go by that statement, you're not even playing anyway. Just, quit the NBA and become the next Colin Kaepernick. I know that's easier said than done, but this dude really isn't playing on the court right now anyway. And once again, the point I'm trying to make is I agree and I see where Kyrie Irving is coming from, but that doesn't mean the season should be stopped. But at the same time, I do credit Kyrie Irving for speaking what he really does believe in and at least throwing the idea into players' heads. Because I guarantee this, there are some players that were on that call that two things. One, they didn't even think about what Kyrie Irving said. They kind of just assumed that the NBA season is going to come back and that there would be no legit way that it would not happen. Not because of the pandemic, not because of owners and players fighting over money like what's been going on in Major League Baseball. This is a little bit more of a tough subject to have an opinion on. And that's why I kind of give Kyrie Irving credit. I think there are many other players around the league that feel the exact same way that Kyrie Irving does regarding this topic. The only problem is they're too afraid to say it. And that's where I'm going to give Kyrie Irving credit. This guy is the vice president of the Players Association, and he got elected that title by his former players. So that makes you think that at least some of the players in the NBA respect Kyrie Irving and the decisions that he can make. So when he says that, I guarantee there are a bunch of other players throughout the NBA that feel the exact same way he does. And Kyrie Irving is a guy that, to begin with, doesn't have the best reputation by the fans. They like to mess with him sometimes. So I'll give Kyrie Irving credit for speaking his mind and thinking what he believes in. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I also believe the NBA season and the playoffs should be canceled after everything that they've tried to do, since the pandemic hit. And it's going to be interesting for me to see how exactly Adam Silver handles the situation, because he's going to want the playoffs to happen. He's going to want to make money for the league. But at the same time, if more players like Dwight Howard and Kyrie Irving and Carmelo Anthony just keep on coming out and saying things like this, Adam Silver could find himself in a very tricky spot. And Twitter blew up over the report Friday night. It's kind of been a little quiet since. We still have a bunch of time until the NBA playoffs actually do kick off. So this is just going to be a situation that we're going to have to monitor. And I do give Kyrie Irving credit for speaking out his mind and not caring what other people think of him, even though I may not necessarily agree with him.